In today's show, we discuss another one in our popular Dynamite Conspiracy episodes. We discuss HAARP. What is it? And time permitting, we'll also discuss the Bermuda Triangle. Why does it cause such issues?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh dear, I have given up. I'm going to stop asking you in future.
Oh, that would be nice.
I'm upbeat, all positive, and you bring me down. What's going on?
I got to be honest with you. Your optimism and joie de vivre is really stomach churning stuff. It really gets me. You know, it's just how can anybody be so happy all the time? It's just, you're like Pollyanna. Oh, for crying out loud!
That's why we're chalk and cheese, my friend. Anyway, I'm not going to ask you to say hi to the audience. I'm going to do it. Hello, audience. Welcome back to the shenanigans. Anyway, in today's show, we're actually doing another one of our popular Dynamite Conspiracy episodes. And in today's show, we're firstly going to discuss HAARP. What is it, you might add? Now, Tayo, this is a topic I obviously came up with, but let me ask you first of all, what do you know about it?
It's something to do with the weather or some kind of monitoring thing the United States government is or used to do. I read somewhere that the Air Force, I believe it's an Air Force project, in 2013 went to Congress and said they were going to shut down the project. I don't know whether they have or have not. So frankly, I didn't even know this thing existed until you mentioned it. And I didn't want to spoil this episode by investigating it too closely. I thought you'd tell me about it, and then we could have a think about whether it's reasonable or not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the actual term HAARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. And yes, chefs, yeah, I know, really handful, and it's HAARP for sure, yeah. And it's a project that was jointly funded by the military, the US military, Air Force and Navy, and also one of the universities. Now, it was that they deem it as a project that are going to analyze the airwaves and things like that, and radio communication, and I suppose surveillance thrown into that as well. But the reason why this is a bit of a conspiracy is because of the really high level of power that this thing emits. It is enormous. And where the challenges are, it says that the power that generates excites an area of the ionosphere, which is high in the sky, to such a degree that there's certain people and organizations actually around the world are really concerned. They're thinking, well, why is it this powerful? What is the actual purpose of this facility? What are they actually trying to do? And this is where a lot of things have stemmed from here. There's been books written about it, saying that the Americans have created this thing as a geophysical weapon of some kind, because it is that powerful. It's emitting this energy frequency into the ionosphere, and it can create all sorts of weird stuff. So obviously the conspiracy theorists have jumped on this and said, well, is this some sort of secret weapon? Is it anything to do with what we spoke about just a couple of episodes ago about the Havana incident? Is it linked to that? Because,
why would America attack her own diplomats?
because they are an easy target that then wouldn't complain.
Well, so are the Cubans. They might
Well,
complain, but they won't be able to prove anything, surely. Or the Russians, the Chinese. I mean,
well,
that could spark nuclear wars. You
exactly, exactly. So
wouldn't
what
want
they're
to do that.
doing, yeah, what they're doing is perhaps using this and testing this tech on their own people and seeing just how far it can reach.
Okay, so first of all, if you couldn't, it doesn't have to be their own people. You could pick on Tonga, you know, some small nation that couldn't do anything, you know.
But
That,
you'd want some sort of feedback, wouldn't you? You'd want to generate something so you can get positive confirmation that something has actually happened.
that's
If
not a
you
bad. That's not actually a bad point you're making. Yeah, so that you could do your own testing. So that's what the Canadians are there for, surely.
Well, I mean, this is the
Canadians, the
thing about it.
Belgians, all
Do you
sorts of
know?
people who could.
Yeah. Do you know, at first when I looked into this and I thought, what is this HAARP? Obviously, I'd never heard of it. I did some research. The thing that really actually piqued my interest was this wasn't just something that was raised by, you know, some certain people that have got a gripe against the US or against any of the secret agencies that try and create stuff. What actually happened, even the European Union called the HAARP project a global concern. And they passed the resolution actually calling for more information on its health and environmental risks because the US refused, I'll say that again, to sort of ease the EU's fears and would not allow them to do their own research into the facility and ask the right questions and ask, is this safe or whatever. The Americans actually refused to divulge any information. Now, straight away, you're not talking of a small company or a couple of users. You're talking about the European Union. They had no way of finding out whether this thing was actually dangerous. So that's where they passed this resolution saying, well, we don't know. And we're actually asking for answers and not getting any answers back. And so they've actually they created a document saying that this could be, haven't corroborated it, an electromagnetic weapon. And that's how they've had to leave it, because they have no answers from the US government to give any evidence of what HAARP is actually for.
That's very interesting. But I'd like to hear, okay, so I didn't know that. And it's almost as if we've come to the end of the show. Because obviously, if an organization like the EU thinks that there's some hanky-panky going on there, then there's some hanky-panky going on there. Because, I mean, the Americans might, I don't know why, if it was a completely benign project, why wouldn't the Americans share? Indeed. Especially with, let's say, not so much the EU, but with perhaps elements of the British establishment. And they're usually happy to share with us Brits. They know we know how to keep a secret, and we're part of the Five Eyes and all that sort of thing. So I think they could have. I mean, NATO, for instance, you could have shared with maybe NATO or someone like that. And think, well, because it's benign. Because okay, we've got some secrets there where we, potentially, because with the Americans, if it's not a weapon, then they're trying to make money out of it. And they will have their economic, they'll have economic reasons for not wanting to share. I can see that being a very American thing. They think, oh my goodness, no, they'll know how we're going to make money out of this thing. But I mean, if they were really doing something, with the weather, then surely they'd be saying, guys, don't worry too much about global warming. We've got it covered. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if they're not able to say all that, and all they're saying is, don't worry about it and do not concern yourself to the EU.
Yeah,
then
no, this is the worry.
But then again, I haven't heard anything out of Russia or China. Neither of them seem to be. I haven't heard that they're worried. And I'm pretty sure the Russians would be all over it like, ants on honey, or, some whatever expression I ought to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
the
obviously, that's a valid counter argument. Absolutely, the EU as
The EU are kind of pansy. Sorry to interrupt. The EU are kind of pansy, aren't they? They're all sort of, very effete and weak and feminized men and masculinized women, which just leaves everybody sort of just nothing, just kind of like, ugh. So they are the kind of people who throw their hands up and run around and be very silly and all that about it. I'd be worried if the Russians were worried. If the
although
Russian, Mhm.
although that they may be, but they haven't made it public knowledge. They've just taken
Well,
it
that's not the
directly.
Russian way. The Russian way would be to make a fuss and to say there's something going on there that shouldn't be going on there, whilst then quietly conducting their own counter experiments. And
Yeah.
that would be the Russian way. To not say anything is letting America off the hook. That's not. I can't believe that would come out of either from Shoigu or from Putin, President Putin. So
Okay. There is some equivalent in Russia. Okay.
Is there?
Yeah. There's something called Sura.
Okay.
And so they've got an equivalent thing called Sura. And I think that could be why they may not have been moaning at the Americans, because they know what the Americans are doing because they've got their own. So rather than make a noise to highlight their facility, they've chosen not to say anything at all. Now, obviously, the EU are not in that position, and so they're able to sort of raise their voices and go, "Oi, what the heck's this thing?" Unaware, perhaps, or fully unaware, that the Russians have their own. It's near Vasiluk, about 100 kilometers east of Novgorod in Russia. And it's and apparently it's got the same capacity for HAARP as well. And
well, again, I think we've come to the end of the show because, again, what you've just gone and said, gone and done, is proof that there is hanky-panky going on. And the Russians are in on it too.
Well, they're creating their own thing. And the strange thing then, this is a conspiracy that has to be talked about, because this thing, if the Russians have invested in a similar facility, and also they've actually had reports that it's caused seismic movements where they've switched theirs on. So the power of this thing on both sides of the divide, so to speak, the American and Russian side, if they have this technology, what the heck is it capable of doing? Can it control the weather, as some people have reported? Could they use it as a weapon to create hurricanes in particular strategic locations or weather changes? So could these systems be responsible for creating not an invisible war, but creating the atmosphere to do its damage in a particular location? In other words, stopping a particular group or army from functioning if they're having to deal with the weather or an unusual weather pattern in a particular area. I mean, that's just one thing. That's just one idea of what this whole facility could do. The other one is, because some of the frequencies are very low level, we humans don't like it. At the lower hertz band, I think it's about 18 hertz, we can't hear it, but we can sense it. And apparently frequencies at that level have a weird effect on us. It makes us anxious and not psychotic.
Oh,
but
is that what they call the low flat E? Is it the low E?
I don't know if it's called that, but
That's
what's that?
That's the tone. That's the note. Sorry, that's the note used in horror movies.
Oh, right. Oh, that.
Like that.
Oh, okay.
And
We
it gives
can
you the
actually
creeps.
hear that, can't we?
Well, that's because obviously I didn't generate that in a
The proper
frequency in a frequency that we can't hear. But it's supposedly what gives people spooky feelings when they enter a building.
Yes, I'd heard that as well.
Yes,
that level, of course.
that's right. Yes, that's the thing. So if you can spook people just by playing that, and of course it's virtually subaudible, and it creeps people out, and they don't know why they've been creeped out.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. But I don't know whether, I mean, that's obviously the audible range and we can hear it, but obviously it makes us feel a bit weird. If you go just below that, it becomes inaudible, but we can sense it almost.
Yes.
Something's not right. And
Yes.
they're wondering whether the HAARP system is also, because there's frequency ranges that it can manipulate, can it not send these signals in a more direct manner over long distances? Because isn't it true, submarines, they communicate at about 3 or 4 hertz. That's how they communicate, because at that low frequency, it can travel miles through anything. And obviously a submarine could be anywhere on the planet. So it has to send a signal at a very low level. It's very slow, but it still gets to its destination from wherever it happens to be across the planet. So if these frequencies are obviously not as low as 4, but are within that range that we as humans dislike, they can still travel tremendous distances. So this now brings back to the table whether HAARP could be used to send a signal in a quite pointed manner to a location across the globe and cause a problem. So when we spoke previously about the Havana syndrome, they could have been using it to test on their own staff, who are unbeknown that it was going to happen, just to see the capability. And because it's their own staff, they can get their feedback and see what's happening.
Well, it doesn't that to be the first time that the Americans have experimented on their own people, of course.
No, it's not. It's the easiest way for them to determine whether it's worked or not, isn't it?
It's really cynical, man.
It is. But look, we've had a similar scenario now in Europe, wasn't there? There was a recent incident where, again, CIA or Department of Defense operatives, I think it's Department of Defense, but CIA, I believe, or FBI staff. I don't know, actually. I can never get it right. CIA is the foreign ones, isn't it? It must be CIA staff. But
yes.
In was it Austria or Germany only recently, where they too were suffering in the same manner as the people in Havana in Cuba, where they were reporting they were getting dazed, they were getting headaches, and exactly the same symptoms that they got and reported in Havana, they reported in Europe. Now, could it be that something like HAARP, I mean, I don't know if the facility is actually still running, because the Americans said that they'd actually turned it off, but that could be one thing they're telling one group, but in reality it could still be operating behind the scenes. So could it be that they're still testing this technology over longer distances, because they can at low frequencies, it can travel thousands of miles. So it's not that outlandish to say this could be what they're doing.
It sounds like something is going on. Now, what is going on and why there's all this talk about them shutting it down? I'm seeing that Edward Snowden released. Do you know anything about Edward Snowden, what he said about this?
I didn't know what he said about this, but obviously he's let out a lot of information that but I don't know this particular case. Yeah, please elaborate.
Oh no, I'm asking you. I heard that Edward Snowden put out some stuff to do with HAARP.
Oh, did he? I didn't know Edward Snowden did. I'm gonna actually Google it now. Did Edward Snowden say anything about HAARP? I mean, I'm not sure whether he did or not. Oh, yes. Oh, goodness me. He has. Yes. He has indeed. Snowden reveals HAARP's global assassination agenda.
Assassination?
Wow. Okay, that's a bit of an internet.
A bit of a leap there, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a bit.
I should have to pinpoint it right down to a very specific individual in a very specific place.
Yeah. Okay. Now, obviously, he's reiterated what the military have said, that they say about HAARP. It's only meant to study natural phenomena in the ionosphere. But he's actually said, he's saying it's a charade. He said the HAARP research station, it's strategically based away from prying eyes because it's in Alaska.
Which is kind of close to Russia, but never mind.
Yeah, it's not far away. Of course it's not, over that side, and obviously is close to Canada as well, but in a more less dense
As Canadian
location.
guinea pigs, therefore.
Yeah. Now he's saying, Edward Snowden is saying that with these terrestrial antenna, NATO is as well, as he's bringing NATO into it, is able on a global scale remotely silence perpetrators or deviants and deviant strains of thought. Now he's actually implying that it actually affects people's minds. Now, obviously, low-level frequency can have weird effects on people. It's like you've rightly said, at that low level, it makes us feel eerie and agitated, and so if you've got these frequencies that are at these low levels but very powerful, then they can perhaps disorient people, make them think differently, maybe act a certain way with dread and fear and anxiety. So these are all real, actual symptoms of being.
Well, if the Americans are putting out frequencies which addle people's minds, it does at least explain in some degree the amount of increasing stupidity that we seem to see all over the planet. Because when you're looking at where society is going, especially in the West, you've got to ask yourself, how have we reached this? How have we reached this point? I sent you a picture the other day of a man and woman in their underwear on the London Underground. And when I shared it, I mean, you seem to be quite sanguine with it.
I was.
You temporarily made me question my own mentality and whether I was losing the plot or what. But fortunately, I shared it with other friends, and all of them were like, what the heck is going on there? So frankly, it's you, pal. It's not me, okay?
Well, for the benefit of our listeners, obviously can't see this picture. Let me set the scene for you. It was just a couple dressed normally at the top. Both of them, as a male and a female, had a leather jacket on and were just reading the paper standing up. But underneath, they were just in knickers and boxer shorts, like minding their own business, but standing on the tube with other passengers around. They're there in their underwear. Now, the reason I was sanguine about it, I wasn't bothered, is because they looked odd. And in some places in London, you can walk around the streets and everybody looks odd. So seeing somebody in their underwear was like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't anything that I thought was completely out there. It was a bit odd, sure it was, but that didn't then make it breaking the law. I know what you're saying, and they are acting odd for doing it. But personally, I thought it was a stunt, because the picture of whoever took the picture, the photo, it was too sharp, too accurate. And I thought there could be some publicity stunt going on. So I wasn't too taken aback, because I thought it was just something staged rather than a couple of individuals feeling brave or being voyeurs and walking around in just their underwear.
My phone takes pretty lovely pictures. I think other people's phones can take really sharp pictures. That's what these phones do nowadays, a modern phone. Take amazing pictures. Especially if you take a video and then just take a still of it.
That's actually harder than you think.
Well, I do it all the time, pal, so it's fine.
Oh, yeah, no, I do it as well. I do it as well. If you take a video, a short burst of video, you can obviously pick the best one from it. Yeah, I agree.
Possibly that's what happened. I didn't see any reason to not. We're missing the point. The point being, if the Americans are spraying the planet with stupid waves, stupid making waves, it explains why we seem to be getting stupider all the time. That's all I'm saying. And maybe it is time to start wearing a tinfoil hat. Maybe David Icke is right. Who knows? When you started talking about HAARP, I thought you were talking absolute nonsense. But in a few short minutes, you've had the EU asking questions and not getting any answers. We've had Edward Snowden speaking about it, and we've had the Russians getting in on the act. So, what exactly is going on here? You and I, we never say conspiracy proved. What we say is either conspiracy dismissed, or there's something here that needs to be explained. And I think clearly there's something here that needs to be explained. I mean, I'm not comfortable with what I've heard about this HAARP thing. I think we should just let it go. It's just like, what are you people doing? You and the Russians. I mean, maybe we should be asking the Russians, well, if the Americans won't tell us what the heck they're doing, what are you guys doing? And if everybody's shutting up about it, then I suppose the next thing the Chinese will get in on the act too, and then we're all in trouble. I don't know. It just seems it seems weird, and I can't believe that no one in the EU or in the UK, no one knows what it could be. I mean, science is science. So if the Americans won't tell us, surely we ought to have someone within the UK or in the EU who can say, well, if we were to do this, this is what we'd be doing with it, and this is what the effects could be. That's what I'd have thought.
Yeah, you'd have thought that that would be the case. I mean, obviously, we'd have to dig in a lot more and see whether or not there has been any further EU statements made or other documents other than the ones I've already explained. But the electromagnetic impact can impact whole populations. But I'm wondering whether the way that the signals can be targeted quite well, so that you're picking a particular area and targeting them. It's like the Havana syndrome we spoke about. If it was anything to do with this, although we've got no evidence to suggest it was, but if it had anything to do with this HAARP system and they were able to target a particular building from a distance, that would show the accuracy of this, in quotes, weapon that could be used in many, many ways. So it's a tool in their toolbox that they can use effectively. And maybe the speculations that some people have actually said, there was a doctor called Dr. Begich, and he wrote a book, Angels Don't Play This HAARP, meaning the HAARP system, because he was saying that he's researched human brain activity and they've been affected by electromagnetic waves at low frequency. So if this system is genuinely pushing this out, it can affect entire populations, and it can result in people behaving in a weird way that they wouldn't necessarily behave. It can almost manipulate them, not as such as controlling their arms, but stopping them from thinking the way they did before, sleep deprivation, agitated states, and making them act and feel absolutely hideous. So
that would be a good weapon to have.
Absolutely.
That would be a good weapon to have when you're at war, because you could then direct it towards a war front, towards enemy soldiers, and incapacitate them.
Absolutely.
Of course, what that would actually do is immediately paint a target on the HAARP facility. And I believe a hypersonic missile will sort that out really quickly. So whether it is an effective strategy, I don't know, because no one is going to let that weapon stand. That would definitely attract attention.
Indeed.
Even if it was a nuclear burst in the sky at altitude to destroy the electronics and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's a bit better as a stealth weapon, I suppose.
It could be. It could be. But then there's other reasons as well.
Yeah,
because
we just don't know enough about it.
If it's able to set out, for instance, let's say it's sending these radio waves up to the ionosphere, you can create all sorts of weather issues as well if it's that strong. But if going back to humans, if you create a resonant frequency and you're sending that out, because parts of your internal organs resonate at certain frequencies. Now, if you're subjected to a particular frequency and it's strong enough, it will resonate with your organs, and your organs will start to resonate and vibrate at that frequency, which will make you severely unwell.
Yes, bleeding and everything, internal bleeding and
Indeed,
ruptures and
indeed.
so on and so forth. I thought the
So
Russians had developed something along these lines, but
indeed.
isn't it banned by what convention somewhere? It's banned, isn't it now?
Well, I mean, I know the traditional weapons or the chemical weapons and things like that were obviously banned by the
Hmm.
big nations. But is this classed as that, or is this a new weapon
No, the
that doesn't
sonic
come
one
under
I
that
think is
remit?
banned. The sonic one is banned. I think making people's eardrums burst and brains explode or something ridiculous. I can't remember the details.
Mm, or
And
high-pitched sounds and things like that drive people a bit nutty in that respect.
I don't know what sort of sound the victims would have heard, but it was mounted on a tank or something. I'm going back to the late 90s now, late mid
Hmm.
90s, late 90s. So I can't remember the details, but I think it was Clinton or someone sat down with whoever it was, the president. Was it Boris Yeltsin? And they said, "No, let's not develop that.
Yeah,
Uh, let's not go down that route." And I
yeah,
think the new one is the microwave thing, the microwave weapons, which are obviously meant to target aircraft, I believe, specifically trying to knock out drones.
mm,
And in this particular, because Trump withdrew from a lot of treaties and whatnot, I
yeah,
think both sides are steaming ahead with that.
yeah. I mean,
So this HAARP
obviously,
thing is just not part of anything that I've heard about
yeah.
arms control, which would seem peculiar to me
Mm.
if it
But I
wasn't
mean, they
working.
could, in quotes, refer to it as research. But then when you weaponize it, you wouldn't have a
Mm.
facility that's open. They could be using it as research purposes, seeing exactly how far they could take it. Because if it's able to emit all sorts of frequencies, could it emit microwaves from there as well? I don't know. But it's certainly something which is very interesting. If it can certainly send out a certain range of frequencies from that establishment. But then if you militarize it, you wouldn't have a big open air facility. You'd have a smaller, more contained, perhaps a movable, environment, smaller scale. So maybe not as powerful, but at least it could give you similar, smaller scale results and the same mold as this HAARP facility does. But the intriguing part about all of this is that the Russians have their own, which is that's the Sura, which is the HAARP's twin, effectively.
How
So
do you spell Surah?
Sura.
I see.
Yeah. So that's probably why the Russians haven't made any noise, because they have their own.
Because they're busy doing the same thing themselves.
Yeah. Well, why not? They've maybe got the technology and thinking, is there any mileage in it? So in a similar capacity. So yeah. So okay. We've
Lord,
it's an
weirdos.
interesting one. It's certainly an
Yeah.
interesting subject, and some of the conspiracies that we initially looked at and thought, well, these are daft, may not be daft after all. There may be some element of truth in some of these, maybe not to the degree that some of these conspiracy theorists are purporting that these things are controlling whole, societies, but maybe there is some truth in what the US government is trying to do with this HAARP facility, in so much that it is testing control of people's behavior, their body state. Does it affect them in a strange way? And the Havana syndrome, which I keep touching on, could be a byproduct of this facility's testing.
Yes, it could be. Well, the Russians then are not reporting anything similar, so I wonder how they're testing theirs and
Mm.
on whom.
Well, it,
And
it may not be, it may be kept quiet if they are.
and I'm still a little bit skeptical, but only a little skeptical.
Mm.
And also, one thing I do like about this conspiracy is that it doesn't have the lunacy, which is part and parcel of other ridiculous conspiracies. No one is saying that anybody has been killed and that anyone has died in mysterious circumstances.
Mm.
This is the sort of conspiracy which is likely to be, if it's, if one of these conspiracies was going to be true, it would be this one, because all you have are questions and no answers, which is a proper conspiracy.
Mm,
It's not when you go, oh, Mr. So and so was found murdered by persons unknown with piano wire. Obviously, I'm referring to Phil Schneider, and
mm,
other persons have said a lot and are in hiding, but they're hiding out in the open, and anybody can find them if they really want to. So
mm.
we don't have any of this nonsense going on. What we have is serious questions asked by serious people and no answers. And that I like that as for a real conspiracy. That's what I'd expect.
All right, we'll leave that one. We may revisit this if any more information comes to
Well, I'll
light.
start
But
looking into it. I mean, when I say that, I don't mean I'm going to solve it. What I'm saying is
yeah,
I'm going to take more. I'm going to pay closer attention to it just because it just went under the radar. I just never knew. I know another good reason why it's a good conspiracy for someone like me who thinks I'm with it, and I'm on top of things. This is complete news to me. But this HAARP thing. So it's been interesting to look into it.
good.
See what's going on.
I
Then we
want,
can come back to it at some
yeah,
future.
absolutely. I wonder what our listeners think. Are they believing that this is a conspiracy? Is the US government actually doing something behind the scenes with this project? And have our listeners learned something new today, unaware perhaps that the Russians also have
Mm.
something similar, which obviously may further enhance the fact that HAARP is genuinely a military tool, because it is obviously backed by the military. It could be a national security facility. That could be why they've also said nothing or unable to say anything to the European Union, because it's a matter of national security. It's their investment, their testing. So they're not going to give away any information based on a secure or secret experimental project to the European Union. So that's probably why the answers fell on on a blocked door with no answers, and left the European Union slightly perturbed that they couldn't get the answers they were looking for. But
Yeah.
hey, let's move on. We've taught this one. We may revisit it, but now we've got some time, so we can look at the other topic that I wanted to bring to Tayo's attention, and it's the Bermuda Triangle.
The dreaded triangle.
Yes, indeed. Most of our listeners should have heard about the Bermuda Triangle.
In my pigeon Spanish, which is the best Spanish of all, El Triángulo Diablo. Now that's
Diablo.
nonsense. That's not Spanish at all, but it sounds Spanish, and which is why I call it pigeon Spanish. El Diablo, El Triángulo Diablo,
The
the
Devil's Triangle.
devil's triangle. I think that was
Yeah,
what it was originally called before it became the Bermuda Triangle. Or am
yeah.
I? Or did it become the devil's triangle? I can't remember which is
I
which.
don't know, but the thing about the Bermuda Triangle, obviously it does appear that there is an area over towards the Caribbean near Bermuda, which is quite an odd place. There's been so many ships, planes, and rescue craft just disappear. So this is where it creates a conspiracy as to thinking, what the heck is going on over there? What is it? And we've had, I mean, I don't know whether you've had a look at Taya about some of the big ones that have gone on over there. Did you have a look at this topic at
Well, I
all?
already knew some of it, but unfortunately, this is something that I came across when I was young, in my teens,
Yeah.
and became interested in the occult and things like that. I think as we all do as teenagers. And I remember, I believe this was Eric von Däniken. Was that his name, Eric von Däniken, who wrote Chariots of the Gods?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And he wrote about the pyramids of Gizeh being something to do with aliens and so on and so forth. And I remember that he had a short, one of his books, the Bermuda Triangle. At first, I was interested, but then as people started to debunk what von Däniken had said, I became less and less interested. I do recognize that there does seem to be an area, to put it into pseudoscientific terms, there's an area on the planet where there is a statistically unreasonable number of vessels disappearing. So statistically, it's odd. It stands out. It doesn't follow, it's not a normal distribution. Even if you were looking at where there's a lot of traffic,
Yeah.
say the Mediterranean, for instance, there's a hell of a lot of traffic, aircraft and boats and ships. We don't have that number of things just disappearing, just gone
Yeah.
from out of nowhere. So the question then becomes, well, why is this a statistical anomaly? And I think that's a serious formal question that needs a serious formal answer. You can't just be brushed off with just, oh, it's a coincidence. That's nonsensical. It's like, excuse me, it's statistically unusual. It's it's above standard deviation. So statistically something's going on.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
what? And I haven't heard any reasonable. The other reason why I've given up on it is that there isn't a one size fits all kind of answer. To it. You've got submarines hitting things that didn't used to be there. I mean, the submarine, American submarine just hit a mountain, it claims, in the South China Sea. I don't exactly know how it hit a mountain, but there we go. Well, maybe it was thrown up, by geological activity. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
But in the case of the submarine I'm thinking about in the Bermuda Triangle, that hit a shoal or something that's just like, how do you hit a shoal? Surely you've got, you know where you're going. And then you've got surface ships that disappear, and then you've got aircraft that disappear. That's from under the sea to the surface of the sea to the blooming air. So what phenomenon can account for all that?
There are a couple of suggestions as to what could be happening.
Okay, so before you say anything, what logical, non-fanciful, here's what I meant, non-fanciful solutions. So before you go to Godzilla did it, well,
no.
All right, well, okay, let's say what you've got then.
What has been reported by certain individuals who have made it through that area is that the compasses go weird. So there's something in that area that seems to mess up the compass. So it no longer can see north and south. So the compass go a bit haywire. Now, clearly, that's a major concern for ships and planes and anybody that's traveling through that area. So that is a problem. And that could be one of the reasons that there's these issues where boats and ships and planes can get into difficulty, and perhaps.
Yes. Sorry, hold on. Why don't you say that? For instance, that could explain why the submarine maybe hit something it shouldn't have hit. Although I'd have thought that with modern GPS, you're not really depending on compasses. So I don't understand that. I mean, the satellite knows where it is, and you know where you are because of that. But the thing that bothers me about that explanation is if your compass goes haywire and you travel in a general direction, eventually your compass will reset itself and you would have lost time rather than just disappear off the face of the planet. Because what we're saying about some of these things, that is some of these accidents and whatnot, is that the vessels have actually disappeared, never to be seen again. I mean, the Flight 45, which is the famous one.
Yeah.
I believe they found the wreckage eventually.
That was a particular, I mean, do you know the details of that for our listeners that may not be aware?
Okay.
Go on. Do you know what it is?
I know what it is. You can, but
if you want to explain it
to
I'll let you do it because I've been waffling too long tonight. So do you want to explain to our listeners?
I'm a terrible storyteller. Anyway, but in just after the Second World War, there was a training flight, the American Air Force, I believe.
Yeah.
And a flight instructor, 4 or 5 trainee pilots, they took off and was going to be a routine flight out to, I believe, to Bermuda, towards Bermuda. They were going to turn towards some place or the other and then fly back to Fort Lauderdale. So I think they flew out of Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. And
it was going to be a very simple training flight. Fly in that direction, turn, fly north, turn, fly back. And air traffic control out in Fort Lauderdale got some messages. The first of which was they didn't know where the squadron didn't know where it was, and they basically lost. but their compasses, as Tony has already mentioned, the compasses were going bananas. So they were a bit worried about that. And I think the signal just got fainter and fainter as if they were flying in the wrong direction. And then they disappeared. Well, they sent up a rescue flight, but guess what? That disappeared. So you had those two disappearances over a period of time. And this was, like I said, I think after the Second World War.
Yeah, December 1945 it was.
There we go. And for decades, nobody knew what the heck had happened to these people. And then we had all the weirdos come out of the woodwork and say, UFOs and whatnot. But I think I read somewhere, I heard that they found the wreckage.
Okay.
I believe.
That's not something I'm aware of.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong, but I think, well, let's have a look. I think they said the wreckage has been...
Yeah, because of the 5 planes that were on that Flight 19 mission, each plane was a 3-seater. And there was 14 men in total, and they were never accounted for. And as you rightly say, they sent out a rescue plane, which had been, rescuing, hundreds of planes and people in distress, and that also disappeared.
Yeah, that's also
that's even more scary than the first lot, because it's
what was the flight number again, Tony?
Well, Flight 19.
Flight 19, sorry. Why did I say P-45? Okay, they were flying P-45s.
I think, yes. I think the planes were P-45s. Yeah. But it was actually Flight 19. Did you know that the Bermuda Triangle has got a twin over in the Far East?
I did not know.
Called the Dragon's Triangle.
Oh, yeah. Before you told me for this episode, I had never heard of the Dragon's Triangle.
And the Dragon's
sounds a bit racist to me. I mean, why would be quiet?
It was also called the Devil's Triangle, but they changed it to the Dragon's Triangle. And it's over in the Far East. And they too have similar problems and reporting that things disappear. But the unusual thing is that both regions they lie exactly the opposite points from one another on the planet. So that they lie on exactly opposite points from one another on the planet.
Okay, so hold on, let me have a think about it. So if that's there, and then I make it the opposite side, then I draw a line through the Earth. And
through the middle of the Earth is diametrically opposite on the other side of the Earth.
Sounds like it should be. My mind isn't isn't happy with this. It's just sort of in the middle of nowhere, west. Is that west? Yes, in the middle of nowhere, west of Australia, and going up towards the continent.
No.
No.
It's actually, where is it now? I'm trying to get my bearings. It's actually towards nearer to Taiwan. It controls the base of Japan. Yeah, base of Japan.
How is that opposite from the
not far from Taiwan, and it extends more into the Pacific Ocean. So it's slightly bigger, although they haven't got accurate measurements of this thing, but slightly bigger it would appear than the Bermuda Triangle. But they are on the same line and also across from one another.
I'd have to get a globe and have a look at it. It doesn't. I mean, someone says that, but in my head, I can't make it work that way.
Okay.
Because if you,
I'll have to show you the picture. And send it to you. Then that way it would make more sense.
We'll have to publish it too now.
Yeah. So our viewers, our listeners, viewers can't see it. No, we don't have viewers. Yeah, our listeners will be able to distinguish where it is. And it too, like I said, has similar problems where ships have been lost, and Japan at one point stopped sending anything in that area because it was fed up of losing ships and planes. Yeah, and they rerouted, even though it took longer, just to avoid the area, because the proportion of ships and planes lost, as you've already said earlier, was too large, too big a coincidence that they just disappeared. So yeah, that's really odd. I'll tell you one phenomenon that they have discovered.
I'll tell you what's interesting. I mean, I need to confirm this, but it looks like the general area where the American sub hit the mountain.
Oh.
Yeah, really.
Oh, wow.
That's the general area.
Wow. See, that then means there is clearly something there. Maybe it's just an anomaly of the planet that that particular region, maybe through the Earth or along that line of the Earth, that genuinely causes a problem. Yeah, and the compasses just don't work. And remember, you said that most flights or nowadays use GPS, but GPS is relatively new technology. I mean, compasses are still used predominantly by a lot of ships and still planes, the smaller planes. Yes, they have the aid of GPS, but that's really relatively new within the last 15 years, maybe 20 years max.
Well, not only that, but I believe some survivors. I'm thinking about a private plane
Mm,
that took off from Bermuda and was flying to Miami, I believe.
yeah.
And he said he went into some kind of weird, he went into one,
Vortex,
yeah,
didn't
some
he?
kind of weird vortex or
Yes.
something. The clouds were looking weird. They flew into this vortex kind of thing. And everything got messed up. His radio got messed up. His compass got messed up. And so I suppose it also affects electronics, which means that even your GPS would be
Yes, indeed.
messed
There
up.
you go.
Now, what the only reason we mention this guy because it's just a guy telling a story, but we can't be just a guy telling a story because when he took off, he spent more time in the air than he could be accounted for, and just a guy flying from A to B across the ocean and still having the kind of fuel he left that he had when he landed. Do you see what I mean? That
Yeah,
the way the fuel, the amount of fuel he burns and the amount of time he spent in the air is anomalous.
yeah.
So that's why
Didn't
we listen.
correlate, did
It
it?
doesn't correlate. That
Yeah, yeah.
you can't just you can't spend that amount of time in the air and only burn that amount of fuel. You would have run out of fuel or some or issues. So that's what makes it. It's got some kind of evidence to
Mm,
go with it. And
very
I'll come back to
strange.
the Avenger the wreckage was I think the aircraft were called P-45. This is Flight 19 I'm going back
Oh,
to.
yes, yeah, yeah.
No, I'm looking at Wikipedia now and saying it was mistaken for
Oh,
Flight 19. So they still haven't found the wreckage of Flight 19,
mm.
which is
That is
really sad.
strange. It is strange that the Bermuda Triangle has this effect. And there's also another phenomenon that affects the two areas, the Devil's Triangle as well as the Bermuda Triangle.
Mm.
And that's erratic water temperature, that they get warm and cold currents simultaneously. Now, they don't
Oh, that would
understand.
surely wouldn't that instantly make you think about underground volcanoes?
Possibly, but then again, that area, especially in the Far East, yes, there's a whole row of volcanic activity and
Mm.
tectonic
In
plate
fact, it's called the
issues.
Devil's Cauldron, isn't it? That
Yes,
area?
that's right. That goes all the way round. So yeah, that's pretty important there too. But there's also the other thing over there as well, is it's got the trench, the deepest trench in the world,
Mariana.
Mariana Trench. And they thinking that methane could cause a problem where you get these bursts of methane bubbles that come out.
Mm. Mm.
And if a ship or a vessel is
It's
passing
had
by,
it.
yeah, it would have had it.
It's
That shouldn't
completely had
affect
it.
it shouldn't have affected planes, but they're saying that because the Bermuda Triangle, there are trenches there, not quite as big as the Mariana Trench, but still deep enough. Could they also have problems with methane there too, which in turn causes ships to, not only have they lost their bearings, they get attacked from below with these big methane releases that cause all these other
Yes,
problems.
because volcanoes, when they trigger, am I right in thinking that there's electromagnetic activity which they sort of like goes out in a
They
burst?
can do, yes, yes. Electromagnetic, when a earthquake, not an earthquake, a volcano erupts. Yes, there is
Hmm,
some evidence of lightning in volcano
that's right.
eruptions. Yes, that's right.
So if you have an underground volcano going off and you're really unlucky, you could have the electric, the nah, mind you, that would just be a very temporary phenomenon, that wouldn't it? Wouldn't be a long lasting. But you could have the electrical activity disrupt your electronics, followed
Mhm.
by methane. I'm talking about ships here, followed by a methane bloom, if you like, or orb, which as it bubble basically is the correct term. So a methane bubble would rise to the surface, and as it contacts the surface, it would open up below you. Can you imagine opening up below you, and you'd fall
into a
into the
hole.
sea?
Yeah.
And then the sea would cover up after
cover
you.
you up. Yeah, exactly.
And you'd just be gone.
Yeah. You
Gone.
would have no hope. And these bubbles, methane bubbles, could be huge.
And then they disappear. And then the blooming thing disappears, and it's all calm. I mean, 5 minutes afterwards, another ship would pass the area and not know anything happened.
Not know anything happened, yeah, because you just literally gone into a bubble underneath the water where the methane was, and you just literally dropped, depending on the size of this methane bubble, which could be enormous, coming from the not the surface, from
That's
the
a
ground.
really nasty, surprising way to go. You know,
yeah.
one second you're falling, and then how can you scream? Because all you've got is methane to breathe, which isn't breathable. You're struggling for air, and you just die. You probably wake up thinking, "So what happened?" Asking serious questions, no answers, and nobody ever.
Yeah, going back to the equivalent one, the Dragon's Triangle over in the Far East, the 40s and 50s, Japan sponsored numerous investigations into that region, and was fed up that they suffered huge financial losses as well as loss of citizens, because so many ships were lost. And in the end, because popular sentiment prevented Japan from launching further investigations into the region, and they'd actually stopped because they'd lost so many ships in the Dragon's Triangle that they stopped going, we can't keep doing this. This is ridiculous. This is in the 40s and 50s. And
so what's happening now? Do people still avoid it, or
they
what?
do? They still avoid it. Yeah, they try and leave it as avoid that area for as much as possible. And
be interested to know what the U.S. Navy thinks about it.
Well, yes, indeed. Or maybe they won't admit to anything because it's just not something they would admit to, would they? The Navy.
And I'd like to see what happened before you're talking about the 40s and 50s. So this is after the Second World War. So I'd love to see some maps of how the Americans prosecuted the war, because they had a lot of ships in the area fighting the Japanese. And it'd be really nice to see where they were sailing and what they were doing and where their ships went. And because, like I said, I hadn't heard about this, and I'm surprised that I haven't heard about this. So it's one of these things where you're not really comfortable going, there's a conspiracy or there's something happening here, because unlike the HAARP thing, there are other questions that are left which you're not satisfied with. Things that need to be resolved before you can go, okay, I've got a solid mystery. Yes, the Japanese had issues. And I guess my lack of familiarity with what issues the Japanese have means that I can be a bit not nonchalant about it. If I knew that they'd lost 50 ships and like these ships were state of the art, and I wouldn't be nonchalant at all. So at this stage, looking at it, I go, well, I'm prepared to say, what am I prepared to say? I'm prepared to say, okay, it needs me looking into, rather than it means I believe there's something going on. Except the fact that if it's statistically anomalous, then it does need an answer.
Certainly strange. Okay, I'm mindful that we're reaching the end of the show. So do you have any final thoughts on this Bermuda Triangle and its sister, effectively, the Dragon's Triangle in the Far East?
Well, there are people the skeptics who come along and say it's all hogwash and everything, but they don't give us a satisfactory answer. So their skepticism is just cynicism. It's just them just refusing to look and to say this is what it's people refusing to look into the abyss, possibly because they're frightened. Sometimes when people don't look at the data, I think they've got issues where
they're afraid of what
they're afraid of what it might be. But when you get a proper skeptic who can explain things properly and go, this reason and that reason and this reason, then you can listen. So it's one of those, it's kind of one of those cases where I go, I'm not really satisfied that there is something, but I'm not prepared to say that there isn't.
Okay.
So I have to leave it kind of wishy-washy.
Jury's out. Orphan.
Jury's out on this one.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, I'd love to discuss this further. We may address it again in a subsequent show, but unfortunately, we've reached the end of the show for another week.